This is my fight song. Take back my life song. Prove I'm alright song.
Well, this nondescript looking building, most government buildings are, is the provincial government building for Maastricht in the Netherlands, where I'm speaking this weekend. And Maastricht has become most famous for something called the Maastricht Treaty. There's a plaque over here to commemorate what has been an absolute disaster for the people of what became the European Union. And this is where the European Union became the EU, because it was here in 1991 that it was agreed to bring in this Maastricht Treaty, which was a massive centralization of power in the European Union. In fact, to transfer the name European Economic Community to what it became here, the European Union, and it was all ratified and went ahead in 1992. And as the ducks have a squabble here, it's quite appropriate given the squabbling that goes on in the now European Union. And the whole story of the EU leads us here, and beyond of course, but it leads us here because, you know, people now in Britain, for instance, are arguing still over whether we should come out of the EU in Brexit after the referendum, or whether we should stay in because it will be terrible. All the political classes and Tony Blair and all the usual suspects are wanting us to stay in the club that so represents their interests. But what they need to get their heads round is the fact that the EU, as it's become, and much further along the road of centralisation of power and control that it wants to go into, was all planned from the start. See, after the Second World War, if you'd have offered the people of Europe a centralised dictatorship in Brussels, ruled by dark-suit bureaucrats that most people can't even name, then the people would have said, well, hold on a second, they'd have said in Britain and other countries, we've just spent years fighting and dying and sacrificing and being maimed for life to stop the centralisation of control in Europe. What are you doing saying, you know, we're going to hand over that control now without a bullet being fired? Go away, don't be stupid. So they're not going to tell us where they want to go. They sell us something that seems okay to a lot of people, a free trade area. So you join the free trade area, oh no, there's no centralisation of power, there's no giving up sovereignty. No, it's just a free trade area, good for jobs, very good for jobs. We now know through, some people knew before, but we now know from British government documents being released that Ted Heath, the paedophile Satanist Prime Minister of Britain, the man who signed us in to what became the European Union in the early 1970s, had as part of that agreement, that negotiation, agreed to run down British manufacturing industry, run down the coal industry, run down the steel industry, and destroy, essentially, the British fishing industry as it was at the time. It was all planned from the start. So now, something that began, it's all documented in my books, way back at least in the 1920s, this was being orchestrated, this European Union as it became in the background. Once it kind of hit the surface with the creation of the common market, just a free trade area, nothing to worry about, then the process started. I was always going to. There are letters that have come to light in which they were saying to each other, what we're going to do is constantly centralise power in the European Union as it became, step by step, and we're going to give an economic excuse for each step. And then eventually, before people realise, they'll be in basically a totalitarian, bureaucratic, controlled state without realising it, through what I call the totalitarian tiptoe, step by step by step by step, and try to obscure the fact that all these steps are going in the same direction and they're all connected. So, more and more, we heard, oh, well, what we want is just more centralisation of power, because then it will be more efficient and much better, and things will happen quicker, and all these excuses. And then we reach Maastricht here, where there was this colossal transfer of power in Europe, from sovereign nations to the Brussels bureaucracy. Out of this also came the euro. And so, step by step, and of course, as you go step by step towards the centralisation of power, you are gathering more and more power at the centre with each step, and thus, the more power you gather at the centre, the more power you then have to centralise even quicker. And this Maastricht Treaty was an enormous step in that direction. Of course, it's been followed by the Lisbon Treaty, which took it even further into a centralised tyranny. So, we have something that was planned from the start to be what it is now, and what is planned to become even more of a dictatorship. And this is the reason that when countries have had referendums, like over the proposed European constitution, or whether the referendum in Ireland, etc., and other places, whenever the people have voted not to allow further centralisation of power in Europe, which is the agenda, these manipulators have waited a little while, done more manipulation in the background, and then insisted on another referendum, which has given them the result that they want. And note, whenever they get the result that they want, more and more centralisation of power, they never have another referendum after that.